You're listening to Choose FI Radio. The blueprint for financial independence lives here. If you're looking to unlock the secrets to financial independence and early retirement, you're in the right place. Stay tuned and join a community of like-minded people who are getting off the hamster wheel and taking control of their lives in the pursuit of financial independence. Choose FI, your home for financial independence online.
All right, everyone, we're back and we're picking up with our 5 household series. We're featuring Vivian on the show today, and we'll quickly hop into it and kind of remind you what the series of challenges that she was working through is. But I think her story is going to have a lot of hope. It's going to be very inspiring for many of you. And I think most importantly, you're going to find it actionable and relatable. To help me with this, I have my co-host Brad here with me today. How you doing, buddy?
Hey, Jonathan, I am doing quite well. And yeah, you're absolutely right. Vivian's story has a little bit of everything. And like we say, stories make the world go round. I know there are a lot of people who are going to see themselves in Vivian's story and, frankly, the challenges that Vivian has. In her intro video, she laid out a bunch of the challenges. But first, just like a little refresher here. So Vivian found FI in the last year. She actually initially was introduced to the concepts through Grant Sabatier's book, Financial Freedom. But interestingly enough, she didn't think that it was reachable. Though it piqued her interest, she didn't think it was doable after reading his book because he reached FI in 5 years. She said he made $300,000 in a year, and it just seemed impossible until one day someone introduced her to the Choose FI podcast. And she saw real people. She saw people like me and you reaching financial independence. And she said, if people can do it, then I can do it too. Oof. Right, Jonathan? How it chills, right?
I think we got our title of our episode, don't we?
Yeah, that's for sure. And, you know, Vivian is, like I said, she's facing some challenges. She was diagnosed with cancer in December of 2019. She is a single mom. She's going through a custody battle right now. And she said also her parents, they came here from Vietnam when she was 9, and her parents have nothing saved. And in her culture, taking care of your elders is a significant thing. So she believes and she fully expects that she's going to have to pay for them. So that certainly has to be factored into her FI number as well. Not to mention that many of her family members don't believe in FI. They live paycheck to paycheck, and they say things like, why would you not live your life to the fullest every day, ... and spend all your money, right? Like, I mean, this is what she's up against. But on the positive side, she's a pharmacist, Jonathan, like you. She has a significant income, and she believes she can save about $60,000 a year, wow, which is a huge shovel to be able to dig out from. And dig out she has. She paid off $300,000 of student loans. Jonathan, that even dwarfs what you had. And it took her about 6 years, give or take. So, I mean, she certainly has the discipline to do this. And it's just really exciting to be here at the start of her journey.
All right, very cool. So, I mean, as you guys were hearing kind of Brett update you on what she's working through and where she's coming from, maybe if you're familiar with our show, you might remember that we spoke with Leslie Tayne, attorney at law Leslie Tayne, back in episode 155 of our podcast. You can start there. Leslie is a single mom. She's an attorney. She helps people with debt relief and figuring out how to handle consumer debt. She approaches this aspect of financial coach from her perspective, her unique perspective of a lawyer that is helping people both avoid and go through the process of bankruptcy. And she's building a very successful practice. We'll have it linked up in the show notes for today's episode. Her practice is called the Tayne Law Group, and you can find her law practice at attorney-newyork.com. And if you listen to episode 155, you will see the overlap here, and you'll see why we were so excited to see if we could connect Vivian with her to go through kind of a workshop in terms of what Vivian's path to FI would be. Leslie was very generous and agreed, and the ensuing conversation is a result of that. We will catch up with you guys on the other side to share our reactions and insights to this conversation.
Hi, Leslie. How are you?
Hi, how you doing?
I've seen better day.
Oh, yeah. I know.
Yeah.
I know. So what's been going on?
So I'm in a journey to toward FI. It's just going through the separation and child custody battle. It's completely draining emotionally and financially. So
I totally understand that. I also went through a divorce many years ago when my children were young, and I know how challenging that can be from not only being a part of that, but also counseling people over the years who are going through those challenges. It is one of the most challenging times of your life, and it's very emotional. There's no doubt. I
Yeah.
understand.
Yeah. So, if you don't mind, ask how many children do you have
I have
while you
three
go through
children.
while you were going through the divorce at that time?
Yes, I had three children at the time that I was going through the divorce. They were 5 and 7 because I have twins. And now that my youngest are almost 20, next month they'll be 20. So it was quite a while ago, but it certainly it was very challenging. And I worked full time, and I worked full time back then. And so I'm no stranger to those experiences. I went through the divorce process. I've counseled people who've gone through the divorce process and dealing with the kids and the financial fallout from that process. So it's overwhelming. What I can tell you is that there is a light on the other side of this tunnel, that it feels like it's not going to end, that it's draining, it keeps you up at night. How are you going to manage? But when the process is over, it's almost like it was a big storm and the clouds separate and the sun comes out, and you have more freedom and more control. And listen, life has its ups and downs and there's challenges, but this is one of the biggest challenges, is to separate and divorce from a spouse.
Right. Yeah. So right now, my biggest challenge is childcare. After the separation, his mom used to watch my child when I go to work because I work full time too. And my work is also a shift work because sometimes I work from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. So it's kind of hard now to see your child. So that's one of my challenge right now. And childcare, and also, yeah, I think that's my challenge right now. So yeah.
Yeah, childcare is a challenge. I had the three kids, and I didn't have any family help. So the children's father didn't live close by, and he worked also, and he wasn't really willing to babysit for them. So I was responsible for finding and hiring childcare. I ultimately had to hire childcare, because even though my children were in school, I worked full time, and I needed to be able to have childcare before work, after work. So, my job isn't always 9 to 5, because sometimes there's events and things that I'm involved with that are outside those regular business hours. So childcare, raising kids, I'm going to have to say, childcare is one of the most challenging parts of raising children. Finding good childcare, and it's always changing, even as the kids change, their ages change, their needs change. And it's expensive. Let's be honest. Childcare is super expensive. I mean, those babysitting bills are really high, and that that becomes a priority expense. So when you are looking for childcare, you can't say that you'll pay less. It's not like you could find a discount. So you have to pay the going rate, and then by doing that, it's a big part of your budget. You have one child, but when you have multiple children, it's even more expensive. And honestly, even as the children age and they get to 14, 15, 16, they can't be left alone for hours on end, because teenagers get in trouble. They need structure and supervision. So, it's expensive. And I feel your pain that way. I went through it for many, 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 many years, and it's hard. It's hard.
Yeah, it's been tough. Yeah. And also, the ability of, having a child back and forth for the first time. And, she was confused and she doesn't know where to go. And
yeah. So she's young.
I think that's tough on a child. She's 2 years old, but
that's why she's confused and she's not sure. That happens with very young children.
That's what's going on in my life right now.
Yeah. So. I know that must be hard. And she's a baby still. So to not be with her as a baby. So it gets a little bit easier, I'm going to say, when they get older, and because then you can communicate with them. And when they're with their other parent, you can still communicate with them. But when they're 2 years old, you don't know what's going on. You can't communicate. And she's a baby, and you want to be able to be with her and provide the consistency and stability. So, there'll be consistency and stability, and she'll learn this new routine, as challenging as it is for her too. Listen, 2 happy parents and 2 stable environments is better than one environment that's not stable and not happy.
That's
So
true.
I always used to try to keep that in my mind, that if I could create a happy home and create stability for my children while they're with me, that is going to be impressionable on them as they grow.
That's true. So, tell me a bit about you, because I don't remember hearing anything about you.
So
Did I
I'm a
miss the
financial
episode?
attorney
Okay.
in New York. I have been practicing in this particular area for over 20 years. My practice is dedicated to helping individuals and business owners resolve financial issues. So that could be credit cards, student loan debt, it could be personal loans, it could be medical debt, it could be somebody who can't file for bankruptcy or doesn't want to file for bankruptcy, and they were looking for alternatives and how to manage their creditors, how to manage the payments, how to manage the credit related to that. So that's what I've been doing for over 20 years now. And I love what I do. I'm very passionate about it. I find it extremely rewarding. I love the financial side of things and the debt side and the negotiating side. I can take what feels like an insurmountable issue for people, finances and debt, and I can fix that. And so I really haven't seen anything I can't fix, to be honest with you. So I love that it comes to me and people are always often apologizing to me about what they perceive to be a mess, a mess of their finances, a mess of their debt, just a mess. And I'm a very non-judgmental person. So I always say, I'm like the debt doctor. So you go to a doctor and you just lay it all out. When you come to me with your finances, you just lay it all out. And it is what it is. There's no blame. There's no judgment. It happened. Let's look at it and fix it. So that's my passion. I do a lot of speaking and blogging. I appear on a lot of television programs and interviews, and I've been interviewed a lot. And I'm very passionate about personal finance and teaching about personal finance from a real perspective, from the front lines of debt resolution. So somebody who's been in the business a long time, has real clients. I've seen it all. I've seen all different kinds of scenarios. So I feel very much in touch with people with personal finance issues. I myself had student loan debt also when I graduated from law school. That was challenging to manage. And so I feel that, I can relate very much, again, on a personal level, like I could relate to what's going on in your life as well. But financially, it took a long time to build my practice. Going through a divorce is very financially damaging. And that was a very trying time. You're distracted. Maybe you're struggling with your spouse with money. And then when you're on your own, then there's some additional struggles. So I definitely feel that I understand and can empathize with my clients. And I built my practice. I'm very proud of my business. And I hope to continue teaching about personal finance and enlightening people and bringing forth the topic of personal finance and debt, because it's so okay. It's okay to have debt. I wrote a book called Life and Debt. So it's all about learning to embrace your debt and learning to love it, because I am not a big believer in preaching a debt-free life. I think it's almost impractical in the day and times that we live in, because life has its ups and downs. Right. So, look at what we're all experiencing now. It's an unbelievable situation, especially financially. So, life happens, divorce, medical issues, children issues, job issues. So it's wonderful to have the goal to be debt-free. I just don't think it's necessarily realistic. And I like to tell people it's okay that it's not realistic. It's okay to be in debt. It's okay to have student loans. It's okay to have a mortgage. It's okay to have a car. And it's okay to have credit card debt. But it's all how it gets managed. You can have all of that. You can have a great credit score. You can still have cash. You can still build a savings. And you can still have all that debt. It's just how you manage it. And I really want to be teaching that information, so that I see on the internet all this misinformation. People have their beliefs on how to manage the debt and how to pay things off and what to do with certain debts. And there's a realistic side of debt issues, of financial issues. And really, they're like a DNA. So your financial situation is different than mine. And even if we had creditors in common, like let's say you had American Express and so did I, but that doesn't mean that we're going to handle it the same way. So just because somebody else did something doesn't mean that it completely works for you. It's a guide to helping you determine what's best for you. And I want to be out there talking to people just like you and everybody else that comes into contact with me about how you can make all this work for you and be successful and be comfortable and sleep at night.
I do have a question since you mentioned a mortgage.
Okay.
So since I'm going through a separation, I might have to sell the house. I only live in the house for 3 years. Do you know if there's capital gain, they'll charge you for that if you sell the house with profit?
So that's a tax question. And if you stay married, from a federal perspective, there's a dollar amount. So if you were to sell the house before you're officially divorced and you file married filing jointly, you'll be able to take advantage of a joint amount. But do you really expect to make a lot of money in just 3 years?
No, we're not married. The house is actually under my name.
The house is in your name?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
all right. But do you expect to actually make a profit?
No, I really don't know.
Right.
But with the area that I'm living, it's actually a desirable area, so I'm not sure yet.
Okay, well, if you put any monies into the house, you can retain those receipts and you can use those receipts to offset that, but you'll have an exemption. Once you know what you're going to sell the house for at that time, you can talk to your tax preparer about how to deal with that if it comes up at all. But it is a good question.
Okay, that makes sense. And then another thing, how do you save up money for a child education?
Excellent question. How to save money for your child's education. So there's a number of ways. One, you can start a 529 plan if you like, and where you set that up and you can contribute dollars to that. You can do it right out of your paycheck too. That's one way. You can also contribute monies from relatives to that plan. You can contribute money like birthday money that she gets. And there are times if you don't have the money, you don't have to be contributing to it. The other thing is depending on your state. For example, Florida has a Florida prepay where you can pay ahead for the child's education. And by the time they go to school, it's paid off. So Texas may have that for the state schools. So if she ends up going to a state program, the education would essentially be already paid for. So you pay into that prepay program. So that's a second way to do that. I mean, you could start a conventional savings account where you're depositing money into a savings account, but you would want to look for a high yield savings account so that you're gaining the most possible interest on it. But the 529 plan is a better option than just a traditional savings plan because you can use that not only for her, but if she ends up not going to college for whatever reason or doesn't use the whole amount and she has children, you can actually use it for grandchildren. You know, it doesn't have an expiration. But there are some tax benefits to the 529 plan. So that's definitely something to consider.
But the 529 plan, you can only use it for college expenses. Is that correct?
No, you can use it for education expenses. I believe you can use it for secondary education as well and graduate school. So there are not as many restrictions on the 529 plan anymore.
Okay, because what happens if your child doesn't want to go to school and they want to do, for example, business instead of school? I mean, don't they have other plans?
So that money has to be withdrawn for the purposes of education. So if your child ultimately doesn't want to go to school and you try to withdraw the money for a non-education, you'll be taxed on it.
Okay. So
so you don't have that flexibility if your child ultimately decides not to go on to, a college education.
Okay. And do you know how they tax? Is it just like regular income tax or just?
It would be taxed as income tax because it goes in as pre-tax dollars.
Okay, I see. Guess I'll look more into it, see how that one work. Yeah, because I heard there's other where they don't do 529, they do the UTM or something like that, but I'm not sure.
Is that Texas?
No, it's not Texas. I forgot what it's called. I had to look into that.
Okay. Well, I definitely think it's worth looking into, to see whether Texas has, let's look it up right now. Let's just see if Texas has a prepay, right? Texas College prepay. We'll just use this for an example. Texas Tuition Promise Fund is the state Section 529 prepaid tuition. The Texas Tuition Promise Fund allows you to lock in current undergraduate tuition rates and school-wide required fees at Texas public colleges and universities, excluding medical and dental institutions. You can enroll in the plan anytime between September and February 28th. Enrollment for children younger than 1 year old extends through July 31st. The Texas Tuition Promise Fund, the plan is the state's Section 529 prepaid tuition plan. So we'll use your state as an example. So Texas has what looks like a great program. I mean, I'm just reading the homepage of it, but I would definitely go to Texas Tuition Promise Fund, read a little bit more about it, and find out whether it is an option for you. Matching scholarships and tuition grants. You know, it might be something that is, I'm not familiar with this particular program in Texas because I'm not from Texas, but again, I was familiar with one from Florida. So this is an opportunity that you might want to look into and be able to utilize. I'm sure there's some, there's all kinds of different links here. So definitely check that out. And I'm glad we looked that up because that's definitely an option.
Okay. I'll definitely go, after this, I'll definitely look into it.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. What do you do for work?
I'm actually a pharmacist. Right now I'm on disability leave, but I'll go back to work on August 1st.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. So you went to pharmacy school?
Yes, I went to a private pharmacy school in Denver, Colorado, which is not a smart choice because private school is so expensive. So I have a huge load of debt when I came out. It was, I think, around $280,000.
Wow, okay, that is a lot. Were those federal and private loans?
Yes.
And are they current, or where are you at with that?
So the interest is go up to $300,000, but I just paid off on May before this whole separation happened. So I just
paid it all off?
Yes.
You paid off the $300,000?
Yes.
Oh my God, I'm so excited! Congratulations!
Thank you.
Wow.
Yeah. It's a long journey.
That's fantastic. Oh, wow. You should be so proud of yourself.
Yes, I'm glad I did because right now
you
it's
are
just
like a shining star. You paid off $300,000 in student loan. Good for you.
Thank you.
Good for you. Congratulations. That is a huge accomplishment, and you should be super proud of yourself.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, it's been a long journey. I pay off. So.
Yeah, good for you. That's fabulous. I'm super happy for you.
Yeah, so now all I have to do is just get over this big hump and then, start saving.
Oh, you will. You'll definitely get over it.
Yeah, so that's where I am right now.
You're going to get there. Don't worry about it. Life has these ups and downs, but, I'm a very big believer on one side is negative and the other side, what happens is the negative and the struggles. I always look at it like, okay, so if I'm going through a challenging time, I say, why is this happening? There must be something great going to happen on the other side of this challenge. So I try to look at it like it's an opportunity to embrace a challenge because once the next good thing happens, I'll be able to appreciate it even more.
That's true.
So I remain very positive and optimistic.
Good. It's always good to be positive, optimistic.
Yeah, totally. What else is going on? You've been quarantining there?
Yeah, just quarantine and battling with cancer, but I'm done with radiation. I'm doing the hard part of the cancer. So right now it's just maintaining therapy. So that's what I'm doing right now, breast cancer.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I'm sorry to hear that, but I'm happy to hear that you're done with the radiation process. And hopefully they caught that early and, there's a lot of success. So
yes, they did.
This is why it's important that you know this. I don't have to tell you. Limit the stress in your life and try to compartmentalize a little bit about what's going on so that you can feed positive things into your body.
Yeah, definitely.
So I'm sure everything's going to be good. I'm so happy that you're finished with your treatment and you have a little bit of time before you go back to work.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. So another thing is, how do you budget grocery with 3 kids? Because I'm sure that's kind of hard.
So anything with 3 kids, it tends to be a challenge, I'll be honest with you. So with groceries, I'm a big believer of eating at home. So when my kids were young, we would maybe order out maybe once a week because I always found that when I order out, the meal, it costs me that one meal what my entire food bill could be.
Yeah.
So I used to structure it with the kids that, we can have a special meal out, but the rest of it is all cooked and home cooked food. So even like if I took them to the zoo, I would still bring lunch. If we went someplace, I would still bring it so I didn't have to pay for it. So I can enjoy some of those extracurricular activities without having to worry about additional costs like for food.
Mm-hmm.
So, I was working when they were little, so I didn't really have the time to go figure out where am I going to say, and Amazon didn't exist when my kids were very little. I would go to the local supermarket and look for things that were on sale and cook food and reheat leftovers and try to be economical about what I was cooking and doing for them. So I also, again, I didn't feed the kids like fast food and stuff like that, like because I still felt that was a meal out and I would have rather cooked or done something. So budgeting for groceries, you have to figure out what is it that you could afford. Okay, so if 3 kids is a lot, so you need a couple $100 a week in food bills. With that, let's say your budget is $200 a week for food bills. So, I would be super careful about what I'm purchasing and try to add it up in my mind as I'm there. And one of the ways to avoid overspending is not taking the children with you. So if you take the children with you, then they want this and they want that. And can we buy this? And can we buy that? And they throw things in the cart. One of the best ways is to have a list, go without the children, and to try to get in and out without getting distracted, because that's where things get more challenging. And try to find foods that are not as perishable, so they don't go bad very quickly. If the kids decide they don't want to eat that, I would buy a little bit more in bulk. So, going to some of the bigger stores where I could buy things in bulk that would last a longer period of time, snacks and other things like that. So I wasn't always going to the supermarket all the time. So that was, that's how I managed with it. And I made it.
Oh, that's good.
But that's really the best way to do it. Have a list. If you only have 1 child, let's say, but you have a neighbor with 3 children, you could also go in with your neighbor. If they're going to go shop at a Costco or BJ's or a large big box store, and you don't need such volume, but you want to take advantage of the cost savings, you could go in together and split up the items that you purchase as a group, which is a nice way to do that.
That's a good idea. I never thought of that.
Yeah, I'm big on sharing. So what also ends up is I also didn't overbuy a particular food. So let's say the kids like macaroni and cheese and you buy boxed macaroni and cheese, whatever brand it is. You can serve that for 3 months straight. And then one day they're going to decide that they don't eat that anymore. And then you're going to have 50 boxes of macaroni and cheese because that's all your kid wanted to eat. So I tried to get away from storing food like that because I learned my lesson that there comes a point when the kids actually get tired of eating one food. And then they're like, Mom, I don't eat that anymore. And I was like, oh, okay. So now I'm stuck with all this food. What do I do with it? So I could trade it with some of what things my friends had, because you can't really necessarily return it. So I would just trade things for other people. Like if my friends' kids liked it, there's lots of ways to do that. Again, the goal is to try to keep your costs down. So if you buy a lot of one item and then you're not using that item anymore, you wasted the money on buying it. So you want to buy enough for a reasonable amount of time that fits within your budget, and trying to be very creative about what you're buying.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. I never thought of that, sharing food with your neighbor. And, we're doing grocery online because of COVID, but not taking your kid. Yeah. As she grow older, she will want to get stuff.
Oh, she will. Because it's all, I want this and I want that and I want this and can I have that? And then they walk around with it and they want it. So why take them with you, to buy food like that? Now, listen, I understand from a babysitting perspective, sometimes you don't have a choice to leave them. You have to take them with you for errands. I get it. But sometimes I would say, okay, so we're going to go to the food store now. You can pick one thing that you want. So then you can limit and manage your expectations. And that's a good way to limit the amount of money that you spend when you take the children out anywhere. This is what you can have. You can pick your one item and you pick what you want, and your brother or your sister picks what they want, or the one child is with you, picks what they want. And this way there's no like, oh, I want this and now I want this. They know going in that there's that expectation. And you have now limited your financial exposure.
Right. That's
right.
good.
Only 2. But as she gets a little bit older, she's going to see things and be like, I want that.
Yeah, definitely. I'll keep that in mind when she grows a little older. Because right now she doesn't know what's going on, but
nope,
I have a feeling that she will.
She's right now, she is the bestest little baby because you could just basically feed her what you want and.
No, she's a picky eater.
Is she?
Yes,
my kids were not picky eaters. So when they were little, like 2 years old, if I went out for dinner, I never ordered them. This is another cost savings. I never ordered my children's meals. So I would order a meal for myself. And then I would take, at 2 years old, she's not eating a whole meal. So I would take a piece of food from myself and a piece of food from her father. And we would give her some of our food. So I didn't order a separate meal. And by doing that, one, we saved a little bit of money. And two, we also taught her to eat more mature foods. So we didn't order off the children's menu where there was spaghetti or pizza, that kind of. She was eating salmon. She was eating steak. She was eating, vegetables. We're eating it. So she ate it. And so as a result, like my oldest daughter has a really sophisticated palate. And even as a child, she would never eat off the children's menu. She would look at it like, you got to be kidding me. So it's a good way to teach the children about different foods and they see you eating it. So I feel strongly about that. I feel like it worked for me. And again, I didn't want to spend the money on food because what if she didn't want to eat it? What if at 3-4 years old, like I bought her a kid's meal, whatever it is, even if it's $10, and she's like, I don't want to eat it. Whatever it is. And then I wasted $10. So my food, I didn't mind sharing portions of my food with my child. And that was another way that we save money, when we were going out or doing other things.
That's a good advice because there are ones that we did take her out and we ordered kid meal because she didn't eat the whole thing. So it's going to waste.
Right,
so,
that's it.
Yeah.
That's it. It goes in the garbage. She's not going to eat it. But if you give her little pieces of whatever you're eating, then and she doesn't finish it, you eat it. It's your food.
Right.
And then you could show them and that's a good way to also, on a side note, teaching them about different types of foods. They're not just eating children's foods that are, basic kid foods.
Yeah, that's true.
So is she going to go to pre-K soon?
So she's 2. I have to look around, see if there's any pre-K program. The dad's a little bit overprotective. He doesn't want her to be with the coronavirus going on. He just don't want her to be in the daycare, stuff like that.
I totally understand.
Yeah.
But by the time she's, hopefully, God willing, that by the time she is 3.5, we'll be past this issue. And she'll be able to go to a school program, where she can go to school even part-time. I like those programs because I think they're good socialization for the kids. And there are some programs, depending on where you live, through your town that are very, very cost-effective. Pre-K and nursery school can be expensive, but there are some programs locally that may be less expensive, but an opportunity for her to socialize and an opportunity for her to learn and start her early education.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and then my mom also a pre-K teacher, so she can teach her too. So she watch her. Yeah.
Oh, you have like a whole built-in system there.
Yeah.
So everything else is under control, and did you file for divorce? Where are you at with that?
Well, actually, we were never married, so we're just separating. Right now, I got temporary primary of my child. It's just
fabulous.
Temporary order. So right now we're in the process of finish the custody battle to the end, to the finalize. It got a little complicated because the person I'm with is I really don't like to label people, but he have a lot of narcissistic trait. So he does a lot of unethical things. So yeah.
Okay, I can understand that that's a challenge.
Yeah, unethical thing like putting hidden camera, putting tracking device in your car, stuff like that.
I can imagine that feels invasive.
Yes, it does. That's why I'm not at home right now. I'm actually at my sister's house. But good thing the court ordered him to move out.
Oh, good.
So he's out of the house. Still feel kind of not very secure. But
you changed all the locks. You changed all the locks, and that you have a security system in your house?
Yes, I bought some security camera right now. Since I'm not home, I can watch it, and it'll notify me if something going on.
Yeah, of course.
That's basically where I am. So we'll see how long this battle ends, because it's just, if you dealing with somebody who's not cooperating with you or want to work with you, it's going to drag longer. It makes the financial situation harder because you have to hire a lawyer.
Yep.
And then the court make us getting a app where we talk through the app. You got to pay for that. And then you also have to pay for a child evaluator, a psychiatrist, court order. Yeah, and then you got to pay for an amicable attorney. We have to pay for that. It's just court order. So it's just financially, it's just a lot.
I know. That's the problem with that. When you have somebody on the other side who's not cooperative, it does increase the expenses and costs. And it does drag things out. And when it gets court ordered, you don't have a choice. I understand very much an adversary who's uncooperative. But, that's unfortunately more common than not when you're going through a separation from a significant other. There's always feelings involved. So sometimes those feelings get in the way of good decision making. But the most important thing is not getting sucked into it and try to limit your financial exposure by trying to be cooperative with the ultimate goal of resolving the issue in order to not have to continue and perpetuate that financial drain. But I understand.
Yeah, so that's a lot right now. So that's where all the finance going right now.
That's where you're getting consumed. That's where all your money's going right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, that is common in divorce, and that's what happens in divorce. We deal with a lot of clients who post-divorce now have a lot of debt because everything went on credit cards to pay for everything, including their attorney's fees. So it's a very common position, not a good feeling, but it's a common position. It can be resolved later. So try not to let it overly stress you out, but use it as an opportunity to limit your exposure, trying to keep in mind what the ultimate goal is. Your ultimate goal is to resolve this issue so that you can move on, and you want to limit your exposure. That doesn't mean give everything up just to give in. But, you do have to fight for what you believe in, of course, and what's in the best interest of your child. And I have no doubt that that's at the forefront of your thought process too. But sometimes you have a very uncooperative person causing tremendous financial strain.
Yeah. And, if any woman going through five who is in their 20s and single, I wouldn't tell them choose wisely, whoever you end up with.
I'm on the same page with you. Choose wisely.
It's not only affect your emotional and finance, it just takes so much a toll of you,
It does. It takes time. Truthfully, so somebody gave me some very good advice, and I think this is excellent to live by. Don't marry or get involved with somebody you don't want to be divorced from.
Oh, interesting.
Interesting thought, that way. Right?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
It makes you think about it a little bit. So is this somebody that, like if we had a conflict, could I resolve this amicably with this person? And if the answer is no, this person's going to try to rip my throat out, not physically, but figuratively. But if that's the case, then maybe that's not a great choice, but it's really something to think about.
Definitely. I'll keep that in mind.
Yeah. And I'm sure you'll make better decisions for yourself as you go on. Now you have a child, so you have to make different decisions.
Right.
And one of the things that, you want to keep in mind also as life progresses is, your priority financially is your child. And then you'll meet people who have priorities that are children also, and that can super complicate things. So another good piece of advice when it comes to relationships, and even when it comes to finances, sometimes slow and steady wins the race.
Okay. Yeah, I definitely agree with that one. So.
Yeah. Sometimes it feels like you're, in relationships, it's not uncommon to want to get to the next level quickly. One of the things that I often also talk about is the financial piece of it. What's going on in that person's life and how do they manage their finances? You could really learn a lot about a person by talking to them about their finances, about their credit. Are they a saver? Are they a spender? How do they manage things? Sometimes that's very telling about a personality. Now, like you said, it's not necessarily to be judgmental of somebody. Sometimes it's just you're learning about their unique characteristics, and you have to decide if those are characteristics that you feel comfortable with and you can live with.
Yeah, definitely.
All this because I've been through this.
Yeah, I'm sure of it. Do you deal with a lot of couples where they have to have a prenup when they break up or anything like that?
So the prenup is before they get married. A postnup would be like when they're married, and usually that's for people who come into relationships with assets. So one of the things that we often, or that the piece of advice that I give to clients is that if you have an asset, you want to protect that asset. You own your home, so you want to make sure that you protect your asset should you go into a relationship with somebody. And that's the same with your bank accounts, your retirement accounts, your cash flow, your credit cards. It's not necessary to combine everything when you're in a relationship with somebody. In fact, most often, it's actually in your best interest to keep things separate. It doesn't mean you can't have a joint bank account, but very often that it works to your best interest. This way you keep your credit separate. That if, let's say, the other person, something happens and their credit goes bad, you're now not connected that way so that it doesn't impact you. And vice versa. If something happens to you, your significant other's credit is not impacted. So it's okay to buy houses separately and cars separately. You know, if you need the credit jointly in order to get the best rate, that's a different consideration. But when it comes to a generalization, considering keeping things separate financially is often advisable.
Yeah, I thought that interesting because with Dave Ramsey, he often want you to put your finance together because you're working together. But, you know.
So I appreciate the concept of working together, and I don't disagree with the idea of having a joint account, but should that web become very tangled, to untangle it if things go wrong for whatever reason, it makes it more complex to untangle it. So it might be better to have certain types of accounts. So again, when you're looking at advice, it's really important to understand how it relates to you and your personal information. So in some cases, yes, putting accounts together because you're working together makes sense. In other cases, it makes more sense not to, because maybe one of you has really bad credit and one of you or has a lot of debt. So that may not be advisable to combine that, even though you're working together to achieve, a goal. But that doesn't mean it makes sense to put it together.
Right.
So I think you need to look at, your individual circumstances and say, how does this piece of advice work for me? What's my comfort level, and how would I be impacted if we put it together or we left it separately? Like I said, if you put everything together and let's say you had a car with your ex and the car was in both of your names, but your ex drove it. He's entitled to the car or she's entitled to the car just as much as you are jointly. And let's say they're supposed to pay the car payment, but they don't pay the car payment. All of a sudden, your credit is now going to be impacted. So if you had it separately and the car was either in your name or your significant other's name, then it wouldn't impact your credit. You have more control.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So that's why I say, when you look at it, you have to take the one-liner and kind of break it down a little bit. How does this work? What does this mean for me? And how would I be impacted one way or another financially? Personal finances and making those decisions require some thought and question and answer. So I always tell people that you have to say, what does this mean? What's the dynamic of the relationship? What are the finances? What are your credit scores? What are your goals? And is it really, impactful to have things separate or together?
Yeah. Well, I don't know you have to go, but I don't have any more questions.
Okay. Well, if you think of anything else, you're certainly welcome to reach out to me. You have my name and Leslie Tayne, Tayne. The book I wrote was Life in Debt. You're certainly welcome to find that on Amazon. And if there's anything else I could ever do for you, you have any other questions, please don't hesitate. I really wish you the very best of luck and the best of health.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you coming on and answering all my questions.
All right, everyone. What a fantastic conversation. Again, huge thanks to Leslie for spending the time with Vivian, helping her kind of workshop the scenario that she's going through. And again, this is her real life. So thank you to both of them for having this conversation and sharing it with a larger audience so we can all benefit from this. And Vivian, we're rooting for you, and we're so excited for the progress you've already made up to this point, and your goals. They're reasonable. They're attainable. You've got this, and we can't wait to help you flesh this out with some more actionable content. So first, Brad, I'm looking at your notes. You've taken some very, very extensive notes. There's 3 or 4 things that I think we both wanted to hit on. We'll start because it seemed like the one big technical question that I heard there was a question about capital gains. Why don't you go ahead and start with that, and then we'll roll over to a couple other things that we have written down here.
Yeah, that sounds good. So yeah, Vivian's question was about if she was selling her house. And Leslie was asking the pertinent questions right up the top of, hey, do you think your house went up in value in the 3 years? You've only owned it for 3 years. Do you think it even went up in value? So, I mean, clearly, like those are the priming questions to get some sense of whether there's even possibly a taxation issue here. But in very general terms, and this is on your primary residence. So the way that the capital gains tax works on your primary residence is if you've lived there for, and this is really weird, but it's 2 of the previous 5 years. Now, for most of us, this is our primary residence. It just means, have you lived there for the last 2 years? That's for 98% of us, but technically it's 2 of the previous 5 years. You get a capital gains exclusion if your house went up, okay? So let's say you bought it for $200,000 and you are single. You have that the house can go up $250,000 and you pay $0 in tax on that gain. So you could sell it for $450,000, and I'm not including any of the ancillary details of, any kind of fees you pay or anything that you could have done to raise the basis, like maybe improvements that you made to the house. Just none of this. We're just talking, you bought it for $200,000, you sold it for $450,000. That's a $250K gain in theory, but that is 100% excluded. And now it's actually double if you're married. So it's $500,000. So I think it is highly unlikely. In this case, Vivian was saying that she wasn't even sure that her house went up at all. So it's highly, highly unlikely that her house went up more than $250,000, Jonathan. So I think in this case, it is very, very safe to say that Vivian is going to pay $0 in capital gains tax if she does sell this house, which she wasn't even certain. She was just kind of looking into this. So of course she has to look into the numbers and all those kind of things. But I think it's pretty safe to say she's not going to pay any capital gains tax on this.
One thing that Leslie pointed out that I know you had highlighted and it really stood out to me as well was this idea that this path to financial independence and honestly your relationship with money and your partner, it's slow and steady. Slow and steady is everything. And I think part of that comes with the confidence that you're on the right path. And I'd love your take on this as well. Has that been your experience? Like, is this just a quick sprint or is this a slow and steady lifestyle play?
Yeah. Well, I mean, for me, it is certainly slow and steady. I mean, that's how I think of everything in my life. And certainly FI has helped direct me in this sense that this is a long-term thinking. Right? None of what we do here, Jonathan, is short-termism. It just isn't, right? It's what are the decisions that are going to make my life better over the long term? What are the decisions that are going to make my investing life more efficient over the long term? I'm not thinking about hitting a home run on some penny stock or something. I'm thinking about what's going to make me the wealthiest over 50 to 70 years. I mean, that is a totally different mindset than what you normally hear. So yeah, when Leslie said slow and steady wins the race, that just jumped out to me as just spot on. I think while you don't want to wish away years, right? And Jonathan, that is super critical. Like we're not advocating like, oh, don't think about the short term. Don't think about having fun in your life that, oh, it's just about reaching FI over 15 years. Like that is clearly not what we're talking about at all. But you need to think that, okay, I'm setting the groundwork for a successful life. I'm setting the groundwork for a successful financial life. And by making those right decisions and just kind of fine tuning them along the way, you're going to get to FI. And certainly Vivian, I believe, is going to get to FI with the significant shovel that she has. So we'll obviously have to talk to her about what her goals are and such. But I mean, this is an intermediate play, I'd say, for her, right? Is that somewhat fair to say?
Get rich quickish.
In a very non-spammy get rich quick way.
Right. I love there's 2 aspects to that. One is you reaching financial independence is not predicated on a hot tip being valid, right? Like, oh man, if only I had known that Netflix was going to produce an 85x return over, the past decade. If only I missed it. Now I can't do this. It's only for those that believe that it was a hot tip. Or if only I had gotten in at Tesla at 100, or if only, or I'm so glad I sold Bitcoin in December, or, like all these things, right? It's none of that. It's none of that. It's slow and steady. We just need to keep up with the market. We don't know. None of us have any idea. You might think. You might even test the waters with something, but none of us have 100% certainty. It's so easy with hindsight bias to pick winners and marginalize losers, but none of us know anything for certain. And so if we can say, great, I'm not going to worry about it anymore, what does slow and steady look like? Then that's when we start talking about things like the simple path to wealth, the stock series, and ideas like that. And so that's why I like being a part of this community, because it's not predicated on a hot tip. Now, what I wanted to go to is Vivian does not have a saving problem, right? That is not what we're targeting here. In fact, you could almost sense and feel a little bit of fear. Oh, wow, I found this late. I need to catch up. Is it still possible? I'm going to save every penny, to the point where Vivian is actually maybe a little bit at risk of slipping into a deprivation state, not because she's enjoying being there, but out of fear of this not working. And so I think for her, what we're going to build on in coming episodes is going to be very important for her to hear and to implement, to give her that balance much earlier. The goal, we are not trying to convince anybody that if you stay in a deprived state without any fun or joy for 20 or 30 years, then in 20 or 30 years, everything's going to be okay. You did not hear that on this show. The key is to find the balance and to prioritize what it is in life that you value and map out a chart to what it is that you want to achieve. And Brad, in your mind, and we'll go to this in more detail, in your mind, what additional information would Vivian need to fight this urge she has to not spend money on fun?
Yeah. So Jonathan, I think the biggest thing that Vivian needs to know, and then frankly, we need to know to understand her story and to follow her story and to be able to help her moving forward is, what does this path look like for her, right? Where does she stand now? We don't have a sense of what her net worth is. We have a sense of what her savings is each year. And like you said, she doesn't have a savings problem. So, I mean, this is going to be a very doable path for her, I certainly assume. But we need to know, does she have any assets? We know she paid off these student loans. She said she only has a mortgage currently. So there's no seemingly debt lying out there. But what are her assets and what are her yearly expenses? We have no sense of what those are either. And I think we need to know realistically what she's going to have to pay for her parents in their retirement. So, I mean, I think she really, like if we were to give her homework, let's say, right? And that's what we're doing here, right? This is kind of a longitudinal study, if you will. That sounds a little maybe too official, but we're following Vivian's path to FI over months and years and many years. And at this beginning, we need to have some sense of where she is today and where she believes she needs to go, right? You should have some sense of what your FI number is. And really, and Jonathan, you can probably go through this real quick, but this starting place, the fundamental starting place is, what are your yearly expenses? And in her case, it's really hers plus what she expects to pay for her parents.
Yeah, how much does your life cost? Brad, I think probably in the next couple of weeks, and we're looking at some dates actually right ahead of this call. So maybe, not to date an episode, but in early October, so just in the next couple of weeks here, we should do kind of an outline of steps. Like when we are coaching somebody or when we're working with someone to help them develop a FI plan, we don't do homework and we certainly don't do busy work, but we would do action work, action steps, small bite-sized pieces of information we need to make better decisions, right? And there is a pretty predictable pattern to this. I know if I am having a one-on-one conversation and they want to just go over their numbers, I am going to start with, what does their life actually cost? Let's just take a look at your, to use some accounting terms, let's look at, I dropped the ball now. I don't know if I can deliver.
Eyebrows went right up.
Dang, I was like, crap.
Oh boy, accounting term. Let's hear it.
I know, Brad. What's the term, man? A balance sheet. Let's take a look at your balance sheet. That's where I was going. Tell me I'm wrong.
No, that's right. Yeah, balance sheet. It would be your assets and liabilities, and then your income statement, right? Would be
yes,
income and expenses.
I just leveled. I got afraid, people. I just have I used accounting terms. Like, oh boy, now I got to deliver. I was like scrambling around trying to see if I could figure out what term it was going to be that was going to satisfy this requirement that I just laid out. All right. Anyways, we need to know your balance sheet, right? And we're going to start slowly fleshing this out. We're going to be able to build on that and make some choices to optimize and figure out what we can move, figure out whether this is an income problem or an expense problem, some combination thereof, and then what exact action steps you can take on the other side once we've actually figured out what are the pieces that are going to make up this balance sheet. And most of us have no idea. We have none. And there is a lot of security, a lot of security that comes from knowing what parts need to be on that balance sheet and what it looks like on a month-to-month, multi-month basis. This may not be a scenario we're going back to it every day, every week, every month, but just for you to have a loose idea of what comprises that and what sort of financial picture that paints for yourself can really help, especially those that are susceptible to a deprivation mindset, especially individuals that are doing something out of guilt. We need more confidence that there's room, that we're able to hit our goals, that we're on the path to meet our goals. And that then enables us to say, okay, and if there's more on top of that, then we don't need to feel guilty about that. We don't need to do anything out of fear. We can loosen up a little bit.
Yeah, Jonathan. So I like that. I think that'll be part of our back to basics concept here that we're really, really going back to at Choosify is, what does your life cost? So I think that's going to be a really, really exciting, fundamental episode, right? To come back and say, hey, this is the starting point. What does your life cost? You need, when you're starting on this path to FI, you need to have that sense. And obviously, it's going to update over the months and years that you're on the path. That's just life, right? But you need to have a sense of where you are to know where you're going. And yeah, what does your life cost? I love that.
And if you heard Brad say that and you're interested in what he is talking about, we actually just recently reevaluated all the content that we produced over the last 4 years and recognizing that new people are finding this show all the time. And it may be unreasonable. It may be an unreasonable request to say, oh, it's easy. Just go back and listen to all 400 episodes. No problem. You might just be wanting to pick up and go with us into the future. And if that was the case, how can we on-ramp you to this content quickly? We're starting to build out kind of a curated path to help you figure out where you are and what information will serve you the best based on, what it is that you're working through. And to that end, if you want to actually see us go through this process, what would this assessment look like? How would we build this balance sheet for ourselves or for someone on this Households of FI series? Let me encourage you, just go to choosify.com/start. When you sign on to that email list, you are going to get 1 or 2 curated emails a week where we are basically walking you through the building blocks, right? In a very simple path. We're going to get you engaged in the community. We're going to help you figure out what content will serve you the best in terms of the episodes that we've already put together based on what you're working through right now. You're actually going to get a few video lessons, a few video tutorials of us doing some of these action steps as you go deeper through it. And you will also get Brad's weekly newsletter where he walks you through one action step, that one thing that he's personally dealing with on his own path to financial independence, and wins and inspiration from the community. So let me just encourage everybody, if you're not doing this yet, please join us. Just go to choosify.com/start. Let me encourage all of you to get back to basics. All right, guys, I think that's it. Huge thanks again to Vivian for sharing her story with us, and Leslie from Tayne Law Group for joining us on the show today. The fire is spreading. We'll see you next time as we continue to go down the road less traveled.
You've been listening to Choose FI Radio Podcast, where we help middle-class America build wealth, one life hack at a time.